The candle flickered on Natalie Morgan's coffee table, casting dancing shadows across the bare walls of her new apartment. Rain streaked down the windows of her small studio on the 15th floor, blurring the city lights below into abstract paintings of gold and white. She sat cross-legged on her worn sofa, a glass of red wine balanced carefully in her hand, watching the clock tick closer to midnight on December 31st. This was her choice, her decision. After months of chaos, arguments, and finally signing those divorce papers in October, Natalie had decided that this New Year's Eve would be different. No forced smiles at crowded parties. No pretending everything was fine when her world had been turned upside down. Just her, this candle, and the quiet promise of a fresh start. The apartment was modest, nothing like the house she had shared with her ex-husband in the suburbs, but it was hers. Every piece of mismatched furniture, every plant struggling to survive on the windowsill, every empty picture frame waiting to be filled with new memories. At 29, she felt like she was starting over from scratch, rebuilding herself one day at a time. Natalie took a sip of wine and gazed out at the Seattle skyline. Other apartments glowed with warmth and celebration. She could imagine families gathering, friends laughing, couples preparing for that traditional midnight kiss. A small part of her wondered if she should have accepted her sister's invitation to the party across town. But no, this solitude was what she needed. A moment to breathe, to reflect, to honor the woman she was becoming. Her camera sat on the side table, her constant companion through the turbulent year. Photography had been her escape, her therapy, her way of seeing beauty when everything felt broken. She had spent the past few months rebuilding her portfolio, reaching out to new clients, slowly establishing herself as a freelance photographer. The work was inconsistent, the income unpredictable, but it was authentic. It was hers. The divorce had not been ugly, just sad. Two people who had grown apart, who had realized they wanted different things from life. He wanted stability, routine, the white picket fence dream. She wanted adventure, spontaneity, the freedom to chase sunsets with her camera. Neither was wrong, they were just wrong for each other. Natalie stood and walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. The rain had intensified, drumming a steady rhythm against the building. She could hear muffled music from somewhere in the building, probably from one of the upper floors where someone was throwing a party. For a moment, she felt the weight of her loneliness settle over her shoulders like a heavy blanket. But before the feeling could take root, she shook her head and smiled to herself. This was not loneliness, this was solitude. There was a difference. Loneliness was painful, empty, desperate. Solitude was peaceful, reflective, healing. She had learned to tell them apart over these past few months. She returned to the sofa and pulled out her phone, scrolling through the messages she had received throughout the day. Her sister checking in, worried. Her best friend sending party photos from Miami. Her mother reminding her that she was always welcome to come home. Everyone meant well, but nobody quite understood that this was exactly where she needed to be. The clock on her wall read 10:47 p.m. Natalie had prepared a simple dinner earlier, nothing fancy. Pasta with homemade sauce, a small salad, and a slice of chocolate cake she had bought from the bakery downstairs. She was not trying to impress anyone, she was simply taking care of herself. She picked up the book she had been reading, a novel about a woman traveling alone through Europe, finding herself in the process. The protagonist reminded her of herself in some ways, searching for meaning after loss, learning to be comfortable in her own company. Natalie was 3 chapters from the end, and part of her wanted to finish it before midnight, to carry the story's hopeful conclusion into the new year. But then came the knock. Soft at first, almost hesitant. Natalie froze, the book still open in her lap. She was not expecting anyone. The building had secure entry, so it could not be a random stranger. Another knock, slightly more confident this time. She set down her book and wine glass, padding across the hardwood floor in her fuzzy socks. Through the peephole, she could see a tall man standing in the hallway. He wore an expensive-looking charcoal sweater and dark jeans. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain, and he held something in his hand. A wine bottle, maybe. No, champagne.
Natalie did not recognize him immediately, though something about his profile seemed familiar. She kept the chain lock engaged and opened the door a crack. "Yes?" she asked cautiously. The man turned, and she suddenly placed him. Vincent Ashford from apartment 15G, 3 doors down. She had seen him in the elevator a handful of times, always impeccably dressed, always alone, always absorbed in his phone. They had exchanged polite nods, but never actual conversation. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I know this is strange. We haven't really met properly. I'm Vincent from down the hall." "Natalie," she replied, still keeping the door mostly closed. "Is everything okay?" Vincent held up the bottle of champagne and 2 crystal flutes, looking almost embarrassed. "This is going to sound ridiculous, but I have this champagne, and it seems wrong to drink it alone on New Year's Eve. I noticed your light was on, and I thought perhaps you might be in the same situation." Natalie blinked, caught completely off guard. Of all the things she had expected tonight, this was not one of them. "You want to share champagne with me? We don't even know each other." "I know," Vincent said with a self-deprecating smile. "Like I said, ridiculous. But I'm tired of spending holidays alone, and I'm tired of pretending I'm fine with it. I saw your light, and I took a chance. If you say no, I completely understand. I'll go back to my apartment and forget this ever happened." There was something genuine in his expression, a vulnerability that matched her own hidden feelings. Natalie studied him through the gap in the door, noting the slight nervousness in his posture, the hope mixed with resignation in his eyes. This successful, wealthy man who lived 3 doors down was just as lonely as she was. The rain continued its steady percussion against the windows. The clock ticked forward. Somewhere in the building, someone laughed. And Natalie Morgan, who had planned an entire evening of solitude, found herself making a split-second decision that would change everything. She closed the door, removed the chain lock, and opened it wide. "Just champagne," firmly said Natalie, "and maybe conversation." Vincent's face lit up with genuine relief and gratitude. "Just champagne and conversation, I promise." As he stepped into her small apartment, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne and rain, Natalie felt something shift in the air. This was not part of her plan, but then again, the best moments in life rarely were.
Vincent stepped carefully into the apartment, his eyes adjusting to the softer lighting. The single candle on the coffee table created an intimate atmosphere that made him acutely aware of how forward his gesture must have seemed. He had rehearsed this moment 3 times outside her door, nearly turning back twice, but loneliness had a way of making even the most reserved person take chances. Natalie closed the door behind him and gestured toward the small seating area. Her apartment was compact but thoughtfully arranged. A cream-colored sofa faced the large window overlooking the city. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with photography books and novels. Plants in various stages of health occupied every available surface, their leaves catching the candlelight. "Your place has character," Vincent said, setting the champagne bottle and glasses on the coffee table. "Mine looks like a hotel room, all expensive furniture and no personality." "Thank you, I think," Natalie replied, with a slight smile, settling onto the far end of the sofa. She tucked her legs beneath her, maintaining a comfortable distance. "Though I should warn you, my furniture is mostly second-hand finds and hand-me-downs." Vincent sat on the opposite end, giving her space. "The best furniture has stories. Mine just has price tags." He began opening the champagne with practiced ease, the cork releasing with a soft pop. "This is a 2015 Dom Perignon. I bought it 3 years ago for a celebration that never happened." "What were you celebrating?" Natalie asked, watching as he poured the golden liquid into the crystal flutes with steady hands. "A business deal that fell through at the last minute." Vincent handed her a glass, their fingers briefly touching. "I kept the champagne as a reminder that not everything goes according to plan." Natalie accepted the glass, noting its weight and quality. Everything about Vincent spoke of wealth and success, from his designer watch to his perfectly fitted clothes. Yet sitting here, in her modest apartment, he seemed almost uncomfortable with his own polish, as though it were armor he wanted to remove.
"So what does a tech entrepreneur do on New Year's Eve when business deals fall through?" she asked, taking a sip. The champagne was extraordinary, tiny bubbles dancing on her tongue with notes of apple and brioche. Vincent leaned back against the sofa, cradling his glass. "Usually work. I've built my company from the ground up over the past 8 years, software solutions for healthcare systems. It sounds boring, but it's consumed my life." He paused, swirling the champagne gently. "I've spent the last 5 New Year's Eves in my office telling myself I was too busy for celebrations." "And this year?" prompted Natalie. "This year, I realized I was lying to myself." Vincent's gaze drifted to the window, watching the rain. "I wasn't too busy. I was avoiding the fact that I had nobody to celebrate with. When you pour everything into building something, you look up one day and realize you've built a business, but not a life." His honesty caught Natalie off guard. She had expected small talk, polite pleasantries, maybe a shallow conversation about the weather or the neighborhood. Instead, Vincent was offering her something real, something vulnerable. It made her want to reciprocate. "I was married until 3 months ago," she heard herself say. The words came easier than she expected. "We were together for 4 years, married for 2. He was a good man. We just wanted different things." Vincent turned to look at her, his dark eyes attentive. "What did you want?" "Freedom, I suppose." Natalie ran her finger along the rim of her glass. "Not freedom from him specifically, but freedom to be myself. He wanted stability, routine, a traditional life. I wanted to travel, to pursue photography seriously, to not know exactly what each day would bring. We tried to compromise, but compromising who you are fundamentally never works." "No, it doesn't," Vincent agreed softly. "I was engaged once, about 6 years ago. She was brilliant, beautiful, everything I thought I wanted. But she wanted me to choose her between her and the business. I chose the business." "Do you regret it?" Vincent considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes, especially on nights like this, but I think we would have made each other miserable. She needed someone who could be fully present, and I was obsessed with building something meaningful. The truth is, I didn't know how to be both things at once." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the rain providing a gentle soundtrack. Natalie found herself relaxing, the initial wariness fading. There was something disarming about Vincent's candor, the way he seemed genuinely interested in conversation, rather than trying to impress her. "Can I ask you something personal?" Vincent said, setting his glass down on the coffee table. "You've already shown up at my door on New Year's Eve with champagne. I think we're past formalities." He smiled at that, a genuine expression that softened his features. "Why are you spending tonight alone? A woman like you, talented, beautiful, surely you had options." Natalie felt warmth rise to her cheeks at the compliment, but she appreciated that he had asked rather than assumed. "Because I needed to prove to myself that I could be okay alone. For so long, I defined myself through relationships, through being someone's girlfriend, then someone's wife. When the marriage ended, I realized I had forgotten who Natalie was outside of being part of a couple." "And who is she?" Vincent asked, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "I'm still figuring that out," Natalie admitted. "But I know she's a photographer who wants to capture honest moments. She's someone who would rather have a small apartment she loves than a big house that feels empty. She's learning that solitude and loneliness are not the same thing." Vincent nodded slowly, understanding flickering in his eyes. "I'm learning that too. I have a penthouse apartment that most people would kill for, but it feels like a museum, beautiful and cold. Tonight, I walked past your door and saw the light underneath."
The moment their lips met, the world outside ceased to exist. The fireworks, the music, the celebrating voices from neighboring apartments all faded into a distant hum. Vincent's hand came up gently to cup her face, his touch surprisingly tender for someone who had spent years building walls around himself. Natalie felt herself lean into the kiss, her hand finding his shoulder, grounding herself in this unexpected moment. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, the city was still celebrating around them. Colors burst across the sky, reflecting off the wet streets below. But inside the small apartment,
time seemed to have paused, waiting for them to catch up with what had just happened. "Happy New Year," Vincent whispered, his forehead resting gently against hers. "Happy New Year," Natalie replied, her voice soft and wondering. She pulled back slightly to look at him, searching his face for any sign of regret or second thoughts. Instead, she found the same mixture of surprise and contentment she felt herself. They stood there for a long moment, neither quite ready to break the spell. Outside, the fireworks continued their spectacular display, painting the night sky in brilliant golds, silvers, and blues. The rain had left everything clean and fresh, as though the city itself had been preparing for this new beginning. "I should probably confess something," Vincent said, stepping back but keeping her hand in his. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "I've wanted to talk to you for months. Every time we passed in the hallway or stood together in the elevator, I tried to think of something clever to say, but I'm apparently terrible at casual conversation with beautiful women." Natalie laughed softly, the sound carrying relief and joy. "So your solution was to show up at my door on New Year's Eve with champagne and hope for the best? When you put it that way, it sounds completely ridiculous." Vincent grinned, and she noticed how the expression transformed his usually serious face. "But desperate times call for desperate measures. I couldn't face another year of walking past you without at least trying." "I'm glad you tried," Natalie admitted. She led him back to the sofa, suddenly aware that they were still holding hands. It felt natural, comfortable, as though they had been doing this for much longer than an hour. "Though I should warn you, I'm a mess right now. I'm rebuilding my career, my finances are unpredictable, and I'm still figuring out who I am post-divorce." Vincent settled beside her, closer than before, their knees touching. "And I'm a workaholic who has spent the last 8 years prioritizing business over everything else. I live in an empty penthouse and apparently don't know how to have a normal conversation without rehearsing it first. We're both works in progress." "Works in progress," Natalie repeated, liking the phrase. "That's a kind way to put it. It's an honest way to put it." Vincent reached for the champagne bottle, splitting the remaining liquid between their glasses. "I don't want to pretend I have everything figured out. I don't want to be the successful entrepreneur who sweeps in and fixes everything. I want to be honest about where I am and what I'm looking for." "And what are you looking for?" Natalie asked, accepting her refilled glass. Vincent thought for a moment, his expression serious. "Connection. Something real. Someone who sees me as Vincent, not as Vincent Ashford, the CEO, or Vincent Ashford whose family has money. Someone who understands that success and happiness are not the same thing." Natalie felt her chest tighten with emotion. "I understand that more than you know. My ex-husband thought I should be happy because we had a nice house and stable income. He could not understand why I felt trapped, why I needed more than comfort and security." "What do you need?" Vincent asked. "Passion, purpose, the freedom to create and explore and fail." Natalie set down her glass and turned to face him fully. "I need to know that my life is mine, that I'm not living according to someone else's script, even if that means struggling sometimes, even if it means being uncertain about the future." "That's not a small thing to ask for," Vincent observed. "No, it's not. But I've learned that asking for small things leads to a small life. I don't want that anymore." Vincent nodded slowly, respect evident in his expression. "I admire that. I've spent so long playing it safe in my personal life, putting everything into the business because it was predictable and measurable. You can't fail at a relationship if you never let yourself have one." "Is that what you've been doing?" Natalie asked, gently. "Yes," Vincent admitted. "After my engagement ended, I told myself it was better to focus on work. At least with business, I knew the rules. I knew how to succeed. Relationships felt too risky, too unpredictable. But tonight, standing outside your door with that champagne bottle, I realized that playing it safe had left me completely alone." Natalie reached out and took his hand again, squeezing gently. "You're not alone right now." "No, I'm not," Vincent agreed, his voice warm. "And I don't want to be. Not anymore. Not if there's a chance that this could be something." "This?"
Natalie repeated, a smile playing at her lips. We're calling it this now? I don't know what else to call it yet, Vincent laughed. A conversation that turned into champagne, that turned into a kiss, that turned into whatever happens next. Whatever happens next, Natalie echoed. The phrase hung in the air between them, full of possibility and promise. Outside, the fireworks had ended, but the city was still humming with celebration. They could hear music from other apartments, laughter carrying through the walls, the sound of a world welcoming a new year. It's after midnight, Vincent observed. I told you I would only stay for one glass of champagne and a toast. I should probably go. But he made no move to stand, and Natalie made no move to release his hand. You could